welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm Bruce Waller, your host, where I'm talking to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our community. What did they do to get started, and what are they doing to stay there? And today I'm getting to talk to Melanie Shaffer. Melanie is the Chief Executive Officer of Talent Suite. She's also a board member for the Company Culture Consortium, and she does a whole lot of things. And I am so excited to have you on the show today. Hey, Melanie, how you doing?
Hi, Bruce. I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on here. I love that you do this and share all of this great information for all of us out there to learn.
Well, I'm excited to learn from you today. Just to kind of set this up, we met, I can't remember, 4 or 5 years ago, but we met at a Company Culture Consortium event at Michael's Stores. Yvonne Freeman had asked us to come and present being roundtable leaders. And I remember meeting you the very first time and the passion you had. And then today we get to serve on the board together. So I really wanted to have you on the show today.
Oh, well, thanks, Bruce. I always enjoy everything you bring to the table and your positivity and your just desire to help people. It's inspiring to be around.
Oh, fantastic. Well, listen, I want to get into a whole lot of things, talk leadership with you. I want to talk about your company and some of the things you're doing for 2020. But the first thing I'd love for you to do is just share, just for the viewers and the listeners, could you share a little bit about Talent Suite? What do you do and how do you serve your customers?
Yeah. So Talent Suite, the name actually came from the desire to be a holistic talent strategy firm. And so our tagline is, we're all about unlocking people performance, Bruce. And many times when we start talking with leaders that we're referred to because they're having some type of people problems, they don't really know what it is. And so we apply diagnostics through an instrument called the Predictive Index. It's behavioral analytics to help them figure out where there may be a need for more objectivity in designing teams to align with strategy, to hire people that are the right fit for the roles, right people, right seats. Sometimes it's succession planning. They don't have a bench and they need to use data to understand where are those hidden gems in the organization that we need to invest in today. And then leadership development, because we do leadership training that we pair with the behavioral analytics in really kind of like short bursts. And we have a learn, use, repeat model. So we do all of those things. And like I was telling you before the podcast, sometimes it's hard to say it in one breath.
Well, listen, we're going to talk a lot more about that. And I'm really excited because I remember the very first time you talked about Predictive Index and I thought, what is that? And so we'll definitely learn more about it. But first, I want to just start off. I'd love for my guests to just start off and I'd love for you to just share your story. I would love, where were you born? Like, how in the world did you get to where you are? I mean, you're a woman business leader, a CEO for your company. How did you get from where you started to where you're at today?
Gosh. Okay. So I'm going to keep it brief. I grew up in a rural town in Oklahoma called Sulphur. And I ended up going to the University of Oklahoma, and I actually was an accountant. I was in public accounting my first 5 years out of college. I knew the whole time that was not what I wanted to do, but when you're young, you do what your parents and people tell you, and I wanted to get a job. And so I accomplished that. And I ended up getting recruited into recruiting. So Bruce, I've never been in HR. I've been on the agency side as a contingent recruiter and a retained search recruiter across all types of functions. And in doing that, my story is that I got frustrated working with companies that I felt like were not investing in their people and preventatively thinking about how, as the organization evolved or the person evolved, to align the two. And I came into Predictive Index because the 8 years before I started my company, I was an owner in a recruiting and consulting firm for CFOs. And we were having issues hiring the right people, or even if we hired the right people, for some reason, they weren't staying. We weren't giving them what they needed. So I actually ended up finding Predictive Index for that company and implementing it with our organization. And after that happened, not only did it help us to bring in the right people and scale, it also helped the leadership team to understand when we were under pressure, where some of our, sometimes, toxic behaviors were coming from. So that's what goes into the people performance piece of it. And it did so many things for that company. I turned 40 and I was like, you know what? I don't really want to do recruiting anymore. I want to do predictive index implementation, leadership development, consulting. I want to help companies think about how can they get more out of the people they've got, and everyone's more productive and happy together. And then how do they bring the right people in to complement what they have? And I'm a huge maximizer. How do you get more value out of what you've already invested in? That lights me up.
I absolutely love that. I noticed you had on your tagline on LinkedIn, talent optimizer. I mean, so I could tell, and also training and development. So I knew that those two things were very passionate about. It's interesting how you talk about that. I remember watching Jim Collins at one of the SHRM conferences. He's talking about good to great. He's talking about getting the right people in the right seat on the bus. And, we've been talking about that for years. And I think a lot of companies want to do that, but just have not been able to figure out how to be purposefully and intentional of doing that. Okay. So by the way, I did not know, I grew up in Seminole, Oklahoma, and you're from Sulphur. So
Oh my gosh, we played in football.
yes, and of course, you have the great the national park there, Sulphur Springs, that my family loves to visit, and so that's fantastic. I did not know that. And then but you graduated from Oklahoma, and you went through. I remember being an accounting major and doing great in accounting one, and I got to accounting two, and I was like, nope, not for me, not at all. But so what about how did you decide I'm going to start my own company? What was that decision like, and how has that gone?
That is such a great question, Bruce, because it feeds into the purpose of why you do this. I had an amazing mentor named Brett Lawson who believed in me. And when I came into the company before this, which was named the CFO Suite, so Talent Suite is a little bit of an ode to that company as well. He believed in me pretty early on and offered me the opportunity to buy into the company and become, an equity partner. And, sometimes as a woman, you don't have the confidence. You don't think that you, are worthy of that. And the fact that he saw that in me and invested in developing me, I needed that validation. And, I got to a point where what I was wanting was very different than what he was wanting. He was wanting to drive the recruiting and consulting business. And my passion had really gone over to Predictive Index once I implemented it in our company. I really wanted to do it full time. And so we had this conversation. It was very transparent. And, I was in tears thinking, I'm leaving to go start this. I'm leaving you behind. And he was like, Melanie, let me help you. Let me help you get it going. Let me invest in this. I want to go in on it with you. And so he helped me launch the company doing all of kind of that back office stuff, which I'm really bad at, Bruce. So I was really lucky that I had someone that mentored me, believed in me, gave me the confidence. And then in a moment where he could have been like, oh, the partner that was the business development arm is leaving, I'm so angry. Instead, he was like, let me help you. And so it was this really smooth transition, starting this company and still being available to help them, in what they needed to transition me out of the company. So it worked out really well. I'm really fortunate.
That is a fantastic story. You had somebody there along with you. One of the questions I always like to ask is, let's talk about mentors. And it sounds like Brett was amazing. Not only was he a mentor to say, hey, here's how you do it, or here's who you need to connect. Hey, let me walk the journey with you. That's amazing. Yeah. What about, so you see the importance of mentorship. I'm always curious about, mentors. I think that's been a big part of the success for my career. Were there other mentors along the way that have helped you as well? And do you, today, do you have any kind of mentorship program or do you mentor others?
Yeah, so God, I've been lucky to have three or four over the span of my life. I feel like every phase where I needed it, like someone was there that saw my potential. And if you knew my behavioral analytics as well, Bruce, I'm not afraid to ask. So there's that. But one that I remember that was really significant early in my career is when I was in accounting and I was really struggling. I had a major illness that kept me out of work for about 8 months. And when I came back, I know I wasn't at my best. And he really kind of worked with me during that time. And I know it probably put a lot of strain on him. And then when he gave me my performance review at the end of that engagement, he should have ripped me, like I did not do a good job.
Mm,
And instead, he said, I'm going to tell you some things I'm not putting on this form. But he was
mm,
very serious with me. He said, I'm telling you, though, you're behind your peers. And if you don't focus on these things, and he listed them out, you are not going to be promoted. And so I'm giving you this chance. I'm not putting it on the record because, if he had in public accounting, no one would have wanted me on any of their engagements, and it would have been the end for me. I would have ended up getting counseled out, right? Because he gave me that chance. I mean, I turned it around and like
mm.
went from like probably 60% to like 100% because I did not want to let him down for putting himself out there for me like that. And so I'll never forget that. It almost makes me cry telling that story every single time of how he gave me a shot at doing it again, like a
Mm.
do-over, you know?
I love that. I love that. Brendan Burchard, I listen to him quite a bit, and he always talks about great mentors will challenge you. And that's what he did. He said, "Hey, I'm going to tell you this, and you can go one of two ways. You can look at it as a challenge, or you can look at it as, you know what, I need to do something different." And he challenged you, and look at you today. That's fantastic. I love that story.
Thanks. Well, I tell it because it's probably happened to all of us at some point in our career if we're open to feedback.
That is so important. If we're open to feedback, I think that's one of the keys as leaders. People that are in that leadership lane are typically open to feedback. I'm curious. I like to ask about how you found your lane. I think that you shared some of the things that have led to that, but I would love to talk about 2020, and I would
Mm-hmm.
love to talk about your leadership. And I was wondering, how have you seen or felt, or how have you shifted your leadership in 2020? Or have you shifted with this COVID, the way that way we're working now in this new world of work? Have you seen yourself need to shift in your own leadership?
Oh my goodness, yes. It's a cadence that none of us have ever experienced before. And, when the pandemic hit, it was rapid movement. How do we pivot? How do we stay relevant? How do we ensure, like, we sell software, right? So when this hit, our software, a lot of our clients were up for renewal. And we were like, oh my goodness, people are going to have that fear of renewing because no one knows what's going to happen. How do we deliver value right away where it's a no brainer? Like, what can we do to pour into our clients? So I would say the first thing I changed in my leadership was like, went on the offense immediately.
Mm,
And, I spent a lot of time, I'm sure you and I were talking before about this, Bruce, at night, like meditating because I was so scared, but I didn't want, my people to know. I didn't want my clients to know. I'm very uh, outwardly facing in my role. So it was a lot of kind of goal setting of short-term goals. We went from long-term to short-term. I would say that's the first thing we started doing. And goals that were not what you would typically set, like retain key clients, right? Like really get in there and focus on things that when the market is good, you're not necessarily thinking about. So I'd say it was short-term planning, more frequent communication, almost
mm,
over communication. I spent a lot more time specifically recognizing my teammates when they made specific contributions. I felt like that recognition needed to be more frequent because we were all under such stress. So I'd say those were the three things that are most significant: was the communication, the shorter term goals, and recognition.
that's fantastic. Whenever COVID arrived, I remember thinking to myself, I've got to pivot as well. and how am I going to do that? And what I'm going to do, because if I start looking at, I'm in business development, right? So my scorecard is my revenue that I generate for our organization. And if I start just looking at that, it could be some pretty low days. So I
Oh,
said,
yeah.
I am going to focus on these three things. I'm going to stay connected, I'm going to stay visible, and I'm going to stay educated. And so whatever I can do to connect with my clients, connect with whoever, business partners. And then I want to stay visible. And like what you're talking about, having more meetings. And, one of the things that I noticed that our CEO for our company did is he started putting out videos. And so he started even communicating more, not only to our organization, but to our drivers as well. So I'm glad to hear. And I like how you put that as three. I'm curious, your organization, you talked about this predictive index. I would love for you to go into that just a little bit deeper. Cause the very first time I heard that, I remember thinking, okay, well, that's an assessment. Is that like DISC? Is that, there's so many different assessments. So share a little bit more about that and how you've used that to continue to help companies.
Sure. Okay. So I'm certified in StrengthsFinder, which people know that. They know MBTI, they know DISC, like you said. There's a lot of behavioral assessments out there. In fact, there's over 800 of them, Bruce.
Wow.
So what differentiates Predictive Index is it is actually rooted in data and science and has been validated in over 350 studies, and it sits in a software. So the predictive index that it's called is the 5-minute behavioral assessment that you've, I'm sure at some point taken, given your expertise. That is how you capture information about someone quickly and populate it into a database that you can then use for designing teams, for setting baselines for hiring. So there's a job assessment within Predictive Index that the key stakeholders take. It takes about 10 minutes. And you use that as an objective baseline to measure against the behavior results. So what's important in applying a psychometric is really the intent of the publisher. And you mentioned DISC. So DISC is for development. It is not for selection. Mm-hmm. There are only 2 psychometrics out there that have been validated with the rich history like PI, and it's Hogan and Predictive Index. And Hogan is really used more for executive hiring because it's, many, many pages long. Predictive Index, you get, in a 5-minute investment, a 3-page report that tells you the major ways that someone needs to work. So it's all about sustained performance was the intention of the publisher PI, as well as fit to role.
That's fantastic. I did not realize that's more for selective versus development.
It's for both. It
is. Okay. So it is for both, but the main 2 are Hogan and PI.
Yeah. If you're going to use it for selection.
For selection. Yeah. Okay. Good. I'm curious. So a couple things. Number one, how many companies use PI? I mean, is there like a majority of companies, they really invest in this, or is it a small percentage? Number one. And number 2, what would be like something that would, that you might see that you would want to say, hey, you should consider using this? Like, who should consider using PI?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, PI has thousands of clients. This space is pretty fractionalized though, Bruce. Like I said, there's 800 psychometrics out there. And, some companies are using homegrown. Some companies are using things that an IO psychologist wrote specifically for them. Some companies use something specifically for their industry. It really is a fractionalized space. As far as having been around the longest, PI is the one that most people know the name because the founder was kind of the godfather of psychometrics. So that answers your question about, there's thousands of clients. It comes in every language, so it's international. And then your second question was, what was that about? Remind me again.
Yeah. How would someone know that they should consider using PI? Like, who would be someone that would think about that? And what would be some different things that they could, that you could say, there's these different signs that should tell you that, hey, you should consider using that.
Well, I have clients as small as 10 million in revenue, and I have clients as large as several billion in revenue.
Mhm.
So it really spans the gamut. Um, when I have initial conversations with a company as far as who should be using it, it's anyone looking to get more performance out of their people. It is an organization that wants to have predictive data and analytics to think about hiring that can be customized to each role. So, because the key stakeholders in the organization, Bruce, take the job assessment. So every role, you're going to have an individualized baseline. And so let's say you have a company that has, one of ours is a hospitality company that operates marinas, and they have marinas all over the United States. Well, the GM baseline for hiring those people is different based on the location and the way the facilities are run as far as who they'd want to bring into that role. So the companies that typically work with us are the ones that are change agents. They're using something, one of the other, 800 out there, and it's giving them a report, and they don't really know how to use it. And then it goes in a drawer once they hire those people. So the executives that we work with are seeking transformation. They are tired of using piecemeal, like, oh, we use like this thing that we don't even really understand for hiring. And then we use DISC, and we use StrengthsFinder for leadership development. And then we use Hogan for our executive development. And so it's really companies seeking a holistic, scalable, simple solution, because you can use PI for all of those things.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so I understand it a lot better now. And so, really, at the end of the day, it's when you're having these conversations and these different professionals are sharing, like, hey, we would like to do things better. We would like to optimize. That's where you can have that conversation. That's fantastic. Okay, so I'm curious. I mean, so I'm listening to you share this, and I can feel your energy. And so, what is it that energizes you so much about not just optimizing talent, but in the leadership development piece? Because I mean, I can just tell that's a big passion for you.
Yeah, I just, so my two core values, I narrowed mine down to two about a year ago, are excellence and collaboration.
Mm.
And excellence for me is how I view everything in my life. Am I being excellent as a mother? Am I being excellent as a leader? Am I being excellent as, a provider of these analytics and leadership development? And then the collaboration for me is aspirational, Bruce, because even though I love working through people, I have a really high need to drive. And so I think consciously about that core value a lot. Like, am I being collaborative right now, or am I stifling innovation by putting my thumbprint all over everything? So my get out of bed and get super excited because I made a difference in the world is when I see other leaders out there have those aha moments of that self-awareness of not just their own drives, needs, and behaviors, but how are those landing on others? And how do I need to think about showing up differently? Because we can't be 100% of who we are. We have to modify some of our behavior to get better results through others. We can't change ourselves. We can't change what drives us. I could never be in a job where they're like, Melanie, just maintain this and just do it. Show up and do it. I would be toxic. I couldn't handle it. I would become negative because I'm always looking for a way to massage and make something better. It's just what lights me up. So I think it's just the work I'm doing lets me live my two core values every single day. And that's why I love it.
I love you. I appreciate you sharing that. And there's a lot of people that need to hear that. I listened to Brene Brown speak,
Oh,
and
love her.
wasn't she amazing? So she was sharing how everyone needs to have. They need to, like, if somebody asks you, what are your at least two of your values? You should know, you should be able to just rattle those off. And you just did that, and I'm like, oh man, she knows who she is. She knows
Taking
what's
me
important to
years,
her.
Bruce.
Yeah, and so
Taking me years.
yes, and so for me, I'm integrity and continuous improvement. I listen, if I'm not continuously moving forward, I'm like, I just don't feel right.
Yeah.
And I'm always looking for that because I know that if I can improve, I can help others improve along the way. And so, man, that just like energized me. You just sharing that because it flashed me back to Brene Brown. I do have one other question real quick on on this predictive index. And the one question that I get asked a lot about different things is there a way to like measure the ROI? If someone's saying, "Hey, look, that all sounds great. We need that," but how do we know? How do we know it works? And so, do you ever get that question? And how would you answer that?
Yeah, of course. My conversations typically are with CFOs, CEOs, or COOs. So I get that question very frequently. And so, listen, there's easy things to measure when it comes to quantitative around people, right? You can measure sales, you can measure attrition, right? And we've helped a lot of clients reduce that significantly. We have one client that reduced it in less than a year, over 50%, and we saved them $100 million. So I can quantify what we do. Now, from the leadership development side of it, you can measure, and we actually have someone, an industrial psychologist, is working with some measurements with us right now, so we can have some more hard numbers around development of some critical skills, such as, ability to enter conflict and, ability to provide feedback, confidence in utilizing the best of what the team has to offer, continuous feedback loops, so pre-measuring what people, were doing in those areas, and then post-measuring. We're working on that right now, Bruce, because I do want to have some outputs to show for leadership, but you can't really isolate variables enough to have, numbers around like outputs in a business unless you are only doing predictive index as the area of focus on what you're changing. How do you isolate that? You can't, because they may hire someone, they may have someone that comes into, there's so many things that can affect performance of people outside of implementing predictive index, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So quantitatively, the only way I know to measure it today is turnover, right? And we have plenty of clients, we have testimonials on our website that talk about that. The more soft skills development we do with it of, self-awareness, I think you'd almost have to be engagement surveys. But again, how do you isolate and say that was only predictive index, Bruce? I'm still
Yeah.
working on that.
Yeah, no, hey, listen, I'm with you. I think that we're in a data-driven world and
We are.
everybody wants to see data, but there are some things that you have to look past the data as well.
Well,
And so,
and it's hard to isolate,
yes.
how can you say that just that affected that percent increase in whatever?
Yeah, exactly. I'm in relocation. So a lot of times I talk about the importance of onboarding. And if talent is outside of the area and they need to be relocated, relocation becomes part of onboarding. So,
Mm.
and it's like, okay, well, how do you measure that? And so it's so challenging. Oh, that's fantastic. I love that. I want to just real quick, I want to just shift. We also serve together on the Company Culture Consortium on the board. And I would just love for you to just share just real quick a little bit about that organization and how they serve and why companies should consider being part of that.
Yeah. Well, so I feel like the organization is still evolving. It's still a young organization, and really the mission was to make Dallas a center of excellence for workplace culture. So we've got, so many companies coming here, and having an organization that really is consciously trying to collaborate amongst the companies here to be that place of excellence in workplace cultures that companies want to come here and learn from us and be part of that. So, I don't, it's probably 2.5 years in.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's very young, right? Very young.
yeah. And I joined after they'd been together about a year. So I came on the board, I guess maybe 14 months into, the cycle of development. And we're still, I think figuring it out. I feel like we had just kind of, as like hit our stride to some extent and then COVID came in.
COVID.
Reset, right? So I think, we were just talking about before this that we want to continue to offer, what people are seeking to come to a place and be able to share best practices. And I think the last meeting that we had with Ginger Hardage, I feel like, from Southwest Airlines, those listening that, do not know who she is, but was the communications officer and, culture carrier within Southwest Airlines for many years. And so that was fantastic because she shared some great nuggets. And then I thought even like the most impactful part of it was the breakout groups we had
Yes.
after. And, coming back, she inspired that with what she talked about. But I took some things away from that I've been able to share with other audiences I talked to that, I want more of that. That's what I'm hoping we can do more of, Bruce, is the sharing, get the right people in the room to share, because that's how we all get better together.
Yeah, there's a silver lining in this COVID. And one of the silver linings is we had never even thought about having a virtual event. And because at our on-site events, we would listen to the speaker, we'd take a tour and go our own ways. But with this event, all of a sudden we got in these breakout rooms and we're like having these great conversations. So I just look for more of that. I wanted to just real quick, the audience to hear a little bit about that. I'll put some information in the show notes so they can learn more about that. And so I certainly am honored to serve with you on that. I want to real quick, I want to shift into, we talk about leading our teams, but I want to talk about leading ourselves. And I would love for you to share a daily practice or a daily discipline that you might have that helps you keep on track as a leader of your organization. What time do you get up, and what do you do to keep you on track during the day?
I have not been very good at that the last several months. So I knew you were going to ask me this, and I was thinking about it last night. For me, it's the top three. It's every morning, putting the top three areas that have to get done today, and then doing the hardest one first. And I'd say that's really simple, but Bruce, if you knew my behavioral analytics, you can't put anything complex on me as far as structure, because I won't follow it. I have tried everything, but I have a planner, and I put on my Outlook, I just put my top three things, because it gives me my needs, I know, and my self-awareness, and where I can be, my blind spots in leadership can be that I want things to happen so fast, and I'm so results focused that if I don't feel like we're getting somewhere, I tend to, start kind of like, well, where's this or where's that? Or, when are we going to have this done? And the three keeps me centered. And then we also have, every quarter, we have our rocks as a team that I monitor. So at the end of every week, I look at where we are on those three. And sometimes, we get them done 3 weeks into the quarter. So we switch out that rock and we bring up, something else that we're going to focus on. So I think it's the three. For me, it's the three daily, and it's the three every quarter.
What I love about that is you keep it simple. And
I
I want the listeners and the viewers to know that it doesn't have to be complex. Just keep
I've
it
tried
simple.
complex. It doesn't work for me. I don't do it, Bruce. I just don't do it.
Oh man, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I have one more question before we accelerate. And the question is, I always like to ask, was there ever any, and you've shared some great advice today, but was there ever any advice that was shared with you that you share with others?
That's a really, really good question. That's like, wow, let me think about that. I think I go back to, so I didn't answer part of your question earlier, and what you just asked me relates to it. I have a special interest in developing women leaders. And that's because I've had multiple men that have validated that I can be a leader. I can be a CEO. And so how I try to pay that forward is we do leadership programs through the Dallas Regional Chamber. We do their Lead YP program, and we're doing Leadership Dallas as well now. And, there's just been some amazing leaders I've met through that process that I saw the potential in them, but I don't think they believed it themselves. And just having those conversations, as you would if you were coaching them, when they reach out and, ask for advice. I don't give advice, Bruce, because what works for me may not work for them. So I think the best advice I've gotten from these people that saw my potential is they told me, well, I see that you can do it. How would you do that? And so I challenge, especially I love it with young women leaders to say, well, why can't you do that? Help me understand that. What have you done before that, you saw glimpses of excellence? And I get them talking, and gosh, like they convince themselves they can do it. So I would say it's the greatest advice I've been given is they didn't give me their way of doing it. They told me they believed in me and asked me questions that allowed me to have my own insights. So that's what I work really hard to do. It's hard because I want to tell people what to do. Part of how I'm wired. So it's a challenge for me to sit there and not tell them how I would do it.
That's super inspiring. That is so inspiring. I was listening to a podcast. I think it was Adam Grant, and he was talking about the most important thing we can do is not give advice, but just create that framework for and tell stories to that framework so that whoever we're talking to can like take that and have that confidence through that framework, right?
Yeah.
Through questions, right? Let me just say this: you are a leader. I've watched you. You have so many leadership traits. You're incredible, and so you're definitely driving in the leadership lane.
Oh, well, gosh, I mean, like, I'm going to go leave stage right now because you just made me feel so good. Thanks, Bruce.
Well, I appreciate that. And I want to shift to, actually I was looking, I think it was, oh man, it was somewhere on your, I can't remember exactly where it was, but I saw accelerating, and I think it was around the predictive index. But I have what I call it's time to accelerate. And this is the time where I just kind of like during the end of the podcast, I like to just ask some fun questions. And I just want to ask you real quick. First question is a book or a podcast? What would you rather listen to or read?
Anything Pat Lencioni. The Advantage encapsulates all of his books in one, and his podcast At the Table, fantastic. It's short and actionable. My type of podcast.
Okay, I have not been listening to that. I will make a note there. Oh man, that's fantastic. How about favorite food? You got a favorite food?
Pizza, man.
Pizza.
I know, isn't that sad? I wanted to say something healthy, but it's pizza.
Okay.
How about you?
For me, it is, oh man, I could, like yesterday, I was at my family's and we had a big roast. Like it was like amazing. I know that's not healthy.
Fall weather.
Right? Oh, especially during the fall. Anything that's warm, a good chili, whatever. Okay. How about, I know that, COVID, we haven't been able to do a lot of traveling. I always like to ask, is there a place that you've traveled to that was it just incredible, or a place that maybe you have on your bucket list?
Well, I have always wanted to go see more of Europe. I want to go to more of Italy, and I've only gotten to see kind of like the outer edge of it. And then when I was there, people went on strike, and so we didn't get to see the parts. I want to see Cinque Terre. That's on my bucket list. I have lots of places I would love to go. I feel like I haven't done any international traveling for the last 5 or 6 years since I had my second child.
Yeah, that's what children would do to you. They put your traveling on pause.
It's easy to find someone to watch one, but two, they're like,
oh my gosh. Well, okay. So I have one last question, and this is a question, our final question. And this is a question I love to ask all my guests. And here's the question. So Melanie, 10 years older, she's knocking at your door. What is she telling you today?
I hope Melanie 10 years from now says, good for you for trying what you were passionate about. Good for you for stepping back and taking a risk and putting it all out there. And I hope it works out, right? We still have yet to know, Bruce. I'm 2 years in, but hey, I don't think I'll regret 10 years from now that I didn't try.
I love that. I think that's the part, you know, you had the courage to step out and try. And I think that's the biggest thing that's the biggest starting point. Like you just have to try. And
Yeah.
so proud of you. I want to just say thank you so much for coming on to the podcast and just sharing your perspective and your wisdom. And like I said, you're definitely driving in the leadership lane. If someone wanted to connect with you or they wanted to learn more about what you do at Talent Suite, uh, how would they connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn under Melanie Shaffer, Shaffer. I have my email and everything is out there on LinkedIn. Our website is talentsuitellc.com. So,
And yep, fantastic. Okay, very good. Well, Melanie, I appreciate you. I appreciate the opportunity to serve with you, and I look forward to everything great that's ahead for us.
all right. Thanks for having me, Bruce.
See you.